So today we will be presenting our thesis topic for the 37th EEC Thesis Colloquium for the third quarter of school year 2019 to 2020 of Mapua University, entitled Wireless ECG Monitoring Based on 3-Electrode Configuration Using E-Textile Technology. The presenters of this video are Thomas Tan and Kim Uy, and their advisors are Engineer Mayo Caya and Engineer Phoebus Cruz. So for a little bit of background, heart diseases are one of the most common causes of fatality in the world. As such, devices that can monitor heart activity are developed. Now, ECG, for instance, is a waveform that represents the electrical activity of the heart. It is composed of different parts such as the P, Q, R, S, and T waves. Now, these parts help the doctors determine whether a patient has a heart disease or not, such that, for example, if the R peak intervals are too far from each other, or if the R peaks are way too high or way too low. As of now, ECG monitoring uses disposable electrodes attached to an ECG machine. Now, these ECG machines are usually available at hospitals, which would require people to come back and forth to get the results. Now, other studies conducted were wireless. However, the amount of distance is quite short. For example, Bluetooth or Zigbee. For the objectives, first is to develop a device that could monitor ECG, which is based on 3-electrode configuration through E-Textile. And then next is to measure the viability of the E-Textile for 30 days or uses. And lastly, to compare the ECG voltage or amplitude signals or readings from the proposed smart loading with the ECG device available commercially or in the clinics. Now, the study is significant to health monitoring, especially for ECG monitoring. The study may be able to provide an alternative way of ECG monitoring, as well as it will be able to help other researchers in the same field or study. Now, the system is only used for monitoring. It is not able to detect diseases. Now, the system only shows the ECG waveform. It does not show any heart rate or BPM. The system is able to turn on or off automatically without pressing any button. Now, for the system block diagram, 7.4 volts battery is used, as well as the reed switch, along with 5 volts regulator and a 3.3 volts regulator. The Lilipad Arduino sends the data to the Wi-Fi B, which sends or publishes the data to the MQTT internet service, in which is received by an end device or the mobile app. So for this figure, the top 3 is used to connect the electrodes to the PCB, and then the bottom 6 is used to connect the PCB and the Arduino. Now, the shirt uses conductive thread instead of ordinary thread to provide connection to the whole system. So in this figure, the other parts of the system is enclosed in a 3D printed casing. Now, these components are separated as it is not washable. It consists of the reed switch, Wi-Fi B, and the PCB with the 8232 and the 5 volts regulator and 3.3 volts regulator and the battery. So in figure A, it shows part of the back enclosure in which in between the two metallic snaps, the reed switch is placed. The reed switch is used along with the circular magnet in figure B in such a way that if the reed switch is placed on top of the magnet, securely the system will turn on. The purpose of the two metallic snaps in figure A is to ensure that the reed switch is placed securely on top of the magnet. Now, for figure A, it shows the gel electrodes along with the cables that connects to the ECG monitoring device. However, in this study, the ECG monitoring system uses conductive thread as mentioned and metallic snaps instead of the cable shown in figure A. So for the mobile app development diagram, it uses Azure App Service to host the Azure SQL database along with a WCF service. The WCF service is used to access the data that is stored in the Azure SQL database, as well as it is used to save the data as well to the Azure SQL database. And it also holds all the methods that is required by the mobile phone in order to show or to retrieve the data from the database. Now, the Mosquito is a MQTT or is a MQTT service in which is used to publish data which is received by the mobile application. Now, the mobile application can be used by the patient as well as the doctor through the use of Wi-Fi instead of Bluetooth. Now, in this way, the patient will no longer have to come back and forth to a hospital just to show the results to a doctor. The doctor can already see the results as long as there is Wi-Fi connection. Now, for the continuation of the rest of the part of this presentation, Mr. Oe will be the one continuing.
For the results, Table 1 shows the conductivity value during washing tests for the conductive thread. This is to determine whether the thread will have a significant change after the thread has been washed for 30 trials. The test resistances gathered after wash was inputted onto a formula to obtain the conductance of each electrode. Table 2 tallies the amplitude in millivolts gathered by the prototype versus the value gathered by the commercial device. The amplitude is from the R peak of the ECG waveform. Figure 8 shows the output from the proposed ECG device. This shows the PQRST parts of the ECG waveform. Figure 9 shows the output from the commercial device. The testing of the two devices were done consecutively. This is to ensure that factors that might affect the wave will be the same for both devices. T-test was used in order to compare values and to conclude hypotheses based on the results gathered. For Table 1, a t-test paired 2 sample is used. The pairings of the sample is for the pre-washed and post-washed values of the conductive thread per wash. The null hypothesis for Objective 1 is that there is no significant change on the electrode's conductance, while the alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant change on the conductance. From the t-test values, the t-stat falls in between the negative t-critical two-tail and the positive t-critical two-tail, which means that the null hypothesis is not rejected and that the conductive thread does not have any significant change. For Objective 2, the null hypothesis is the means of the voltages gathered by the prototype and the commercial device has no significant difference, while the alternative hypothesis is that the two mean voltages has difference. The results of the t-test is that the t-stat falls in between the negative t-critical tail and the positive t-critical tail value. Therefore, the null hypothesis is not rejected and that the E-Textile ECG system does not have any significant difference from the commercial device. Conclusion: an ECG monitoring system that is able to send data wirelessly through Wi-Fi that uses conductive thread was successfully developed. Based on t-test results, the null hypothesis is not rejected, which means that the mean of the developed prototype and the commercial device do not differ significantly. For future works, different sensors that could accommodate more electrodes can be used. This will enable a much more accurate representation of the user's ECG and a better way of connection for IoT, considering communication speed and order of the data sent. This ends the video presentation for the thesis title Wireless ECG Monitoring based on 3 electrode configuration using E-Textile technology.